Guys, this is Dr. Locke. I wanted to give you some help on this lookup functions ExPrep assignment. Lookup functions can be challenging, so hopefully this assignment will help you understand some of the details of the differences between the various lookup functions and how to use them in Excel. I'm going to begin by showing you some examples of the various lookup functions that we'll use in this assignment. There are a number of lookup functions that you can see listed here. We are going to focus on these first three in this assignment, but let me start by showing you an example of how one of these functions is used. So all of the lookup functions are used to accomplish this basic task. Given the value of one field, I want to use it to look up a value of another field. So for example, in this first table that you see, this data range, we have employee ID numbers, and then their last names, their first names, their titles, and their birth date. So for example, I could say, given an employee ID number, I want to look up that employee's last name or their birth date or something else about the employee. So the value that I have to begin with is called the lookup value, and that is the first argument to this VLOOKUP function. So I want to look up the value of the employee ID, and given that value, I want to find out, in this first case, what is being returned is the last name of that employee. So that's an example of how you might use the VLOOKUP function. So now let me talk about the differences between the three lookup functions we'll use. There's VLOOKUP, HLOOKUP, and XLOOKUP. VLOOKUP is you can only use it in cases where the lookup values that you are trying to find in the data range or table are arranged in a vertical column. So in this example here, we see employee IDs are in a column. They're arranged vertically, so we could use VLOOKUP to find a particular employee ID and then return something else about that employee. HLOOKUP works when your lookup values are arranged horizontally in a row. So here is the same data as in the previous case, but arranged horizontally. So in the spreadsheet, it's simply been transposed. So the columns have been turned into rows. So the IDs were previously in column A, now they are in row number 1. So we could do the same type of lookup employee 102, and return something else about the employee that is now in a column instead of being in a row for that employee. Another distinction for VLOOKUP is that whatever you're looking up, your lookup value, you can only return things that are to the right of that lookup value. So if I'm looking up employee ID, if that's my lookup value, then I can return last name, first name, title, or birth date. But let's say I started with looking up birth date. I could look up birth date, but then I could not return something to the left of birth date. So VLOOKUP has that limitation. You can't look up something to the left of your lookup value. You can only return something to the right of it. So if I look up the last name Fontana, I could let that be my lookup value. Then I could return not employee ID, since that's to the left, but I could return first name, title, or birth date, since those are all to the right of last name. So VLOOKUP can be used as long as your lookup values are vertically arranged and what you want to look up is to the right of the lookup value. HLOOKUP can be used as long as your lookup values are in a row, horizontal arrangement, and what you want to return is below the lookup values. You can't return anything that is above the lookup values. So those two have that limitation. Now, let's look also briefly at some of these arguments. So notice the arguments for VLOOKUP are lookup value, table array, column index number, and then this final argument, which has to do with whether or not the lookup is supposed to return is supposed to find an exact match for the lookup value or an approximate match. So here's our first example of using that formula. We're going to use VLOOKUP since our lookup value, 102, comes from a vertical arrangement of values. So when we look up 102, where we hope to find it is this table array. That is, where do you hope to find the lookup value? So it can be found anywhere from A2, so this cell here, through C7. So A2 through C7, saying find 102 anywhere in there. And then once you find it, return whatever is in the second column of this table array. So from A2 to C7, there are 1, 2, 3 columns. So we're going to return whatever is in the second column, and that is the last name. So find employee 102, it's right here. Return what is in the second column of that table array, and what's in the second column is the last name Fontana. So Fontana is the result of that function. All right, range lookup is set to false. False means we're looking for an exact match to the employee number 102. We want to exactly find 102 and not something else. All right, let's look at another example. Now look up the value that is in B4. So this first argument, the lookup value could be a number or letters that you type in, or it could be it could refer to a cell that contains a value you want to look up. So this one contains whatever is in B4, and that is the last name Leal. So this is saying find Leal and look in the range B2 to E7. So B2 through E7. So all of these cells, look in all of those for the last name Leal. And then once you found that, return whatever is in column 3, whatever corresponds to that in column 3. So column 3 for this range of cells, B is actually the first column of that table array, B2 to E7. So B is column 1, C is column 2, D is column 3, and E is column 4 now for that particular table array. So if we want column 3, then we're going to return 1, 2, 3, whatever the title is for that person. So last name Leal, look that up. There it is in this row. So for that row, the third column contains the title sales rep. So we're getting sales rep out of that lookup function. This third example for VLOOKUP, we're going to look up the birth date, 7/2/1963. Well, that's this last one down here. And look it up in the range C2 to E7. And then give the third column, etc. Well, this one's not working. This NA means not applicable. That function cannot look up what you're asking it to do because the lookup value, birth date, has nothing to the right of it. Remember, VLOOKUP can only be used to return things that are to the right of where the lookup value is found. And there are no columns to the right of that. So VLOOKUP is just returning this error code. So that doesn't work. So let's try one more, VLOOKUP 111. So this is employee ID 111, and look in A2 through D7. So this range of cells, A2 through D7. Look up employee 111, and then return what's in column 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, we're going to return a title. Well, 111, that's not one of the existing employee IDs. So that is handled in this case by this last argument, which is set to true. If it's true, it means do an approximate match. So that means if you can't find the lookup value in this column of values, then go to the next lower value. 111 isn't there, so the next lower value is 110. So then we'll use that row, the 110 row, and return what's in the fourth column, which is sales manager. So that's why the result of that function is sales manager. All right, so that's several examples with VLOOKUP. HLOOKUP works similarly. I have those same examples there done using HLOOKUP, and we get the same kind of result. We just have to think horizontally instead of vertically for our lookup values and everything else. So it's just a matter of thinking in a different direction. And then there's one final one that we're going to use, and that is XLOOKUP. XLOOKUP is much more flexible than the other two. You specify your lookup value just the same, but then lookup array is a single column or row that contains your lookup values. Return array is a single column or row that contains the values you want to return. And then there are several other arguments you can use based on what you're wanting to do. So here's that first lookup. We want to look up employee 102 and return the last name. So here's how you would use XLOOKUP. You put in your lookup value, 102 is that first argument. The second argument is where do you think you'll find the 102? Well, we're going to find it here in column A, A2 through A7. So that's your lookup array. And then what do you want to return? Last name, which is in column B. So you put B2 to B7. So it returns the name Fontana because employee 102 is in this row, and so it gives you the corresponding last name. You could use XLOOKUP to do an approximate match. This last one showing approximate match by setting that last, not the last argument, but this match mode argument to be a -1. That will give you the next smaller value, or you could set it to be +1 to give you the next larger value. So the nice thing about XLOOKUP is that you can look up something to the left or right of your lookup value, and you can look up above or below your lookup value, just depending on where things are. So XLOOKUP is much more flexible than V or H. So let's see that in action. All right, so go ahead and download your spreadsheet. If you have not done that already, follow the link to the ExPrep assignment from your Canvas course and download your empty spreadsheet. And then once you have that opened up, we will work on this together. So pause the video if you need to get your blank spreadsheet, your empty spreadsheet, and that looks like this. And when you're ready, we will work through this together. All right, so the first instruction here says complete the first table below by using a VLOOKUP function. So notice what we have here in this spreadsheet. We have movie codes from IMDb. We have the title of the movie. We have the year, the budget, domestic gross, and international gross dollars. So to fill in this table, we want to say for this movie code, tell me what the title, year, and international gross is for that movie. The codes are arranged in a vertical column. So to do this lookup, we can use the VLOOKUP function. So here we'll start typing VLOOKUP, and it automatically comes up. I can tab to complete that, and then I see what all the arguments are. If you need more help than that, remember that you can always use the function button to insert a function, and then Excel will give you all the arguments and some more help, more explanation on what needs to go in that argument. And if you need more than that, you can follow this link to get more help on the function and see some examples of it being used. I am not going to do that right now. I'm just going to talk you through this. So put that VLOOKUP function in and open parentheses so we can put in our arguments. So for this first row, the lookup value is going to be this first movie code. So I'll just click that cell that contains the code, and that is cell I-16. That's our lookup value. Now, where do we want to find that movie code? We can find it in this table over here to the left. So I need to give Excel now the range of cells that contain both my lookup value and the thing I want to return. So I'm going to select everything from A2 all the way down and across. I'm just going to select this whole data range. So a quick way to do that, remember, is to use Control plus Shift plus down, and then Control plus Shift plus right arrow to select that entire data range. All right, so once you have that selected, notice that it's been added automatically to my argument. So that's my table array. And now I need to say in that selection, which column has the value I want to return. In this cell, this is the title column. I want to return the title of that movie. So out of this data range I've selected, the titles are in the second column. So I'll put 2 to represent the second column. And now my last argument is whether or not I want to do an approximate match or an exact match. I'm going to say exact because I should find exactly that movie code in that data range. So false will have it do an exact match, then close parentheses. Okay, and that's The Hobbit. Now let's check that out. Let's find this movie code. I'm going to copy it and paste it into Find. And I want to find it in this sheet. So I'm going to find that movie code and just check it out. And sure enough, the title of that movie is The Hobbit, The Desolation of Smaug. All right, so let's go back up. Now we're ready to do the next function. We want to find the year that that movie was made. So I can use copy and paste here, but I need to be careful. Notice that if I try to just use the fill handle and drag that across, I need to check. It looks like it's given me reasonable values. This could be the year, and this could be the international gross, but I need to check to find out if those are really the values I'm wanting. So I know Hobbit was right because I just checked that out, but let's think about what's next. So Hobbit, I found that by looking up I-16 in this array, A2 through F908, and returning the second column. So let's see what happens when I do year. For year, I'm looking up, oh no, now I'm looking up J16. I don't want to look up the title of the movie. I want to always use this IMDb code. So I need to change that to an I. But what could I have done to keep that from changing when I copied this over? See, now the function's not working anymore. So let's see. If I want to preserve this value as I copy to the right and down, then as I copy to the right, I would want to make, I don't want to change the column value, the letter. So I can put a $sign in front of that. Now let's think now, are there other things that we want to not change as we copy across to the right? Well, I don't want to change this reference either, do I? I want to always use that same data range to look up and return values when I use this function. So I'm going to add $signs to both of those. I'm going to make those an absolute reference. So remember, I can do that by using my F4 function key. So you might have F4, or you might need to hold down the function button and then hit F4. You'll have to find it wherever F4 is on your keyboard, or you can click in each of those places and add the $signs. It's better to use the F4 if you can find that on your keyboard because that keeps you from making typos. All right, so now that we've got the first reference is a mixed one, the column is absolute, but the row number is not. And then the next, the table array has absolute references to that data range. Now let's see if copying and pasting does any better. Okay, now it seems to be working, but it's not giving us the right thing. It's not returning the right thing. So let's fix that. So year, yes, we want to look up I-16. Yes, we want this whole thing to be our table array, but we don't want to return column 2. The year is in column 3 of that table array, so I'll change that to a 3, and now we have the correct year. All right, international gross is in column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that one I will change the column number to 6. All right, and then now that should have the right values everywhere. So once we've got that first row fixed, we can copy and paste this down using the fill handle to fill the rest of that area. All right, so, and let's make sure that, let's check another one. Let's check this one, the Dark Knight Rises. Let's look up this value to make sure our function is working properly. I'll find this one. All right, and there it is. That code is the Dark Knight Rises. It's in 2012, and it looks like over $1 billion for the gross. So let's check those values. Dark Knight Rises, 2012, over $1 billion. That's right. All right, so we have successfully used the VLOOKUP function. Now in this next one, we're going to use, as our lookup value, we'll use a different thing. We're going to use international gross. That's in this rightmost column, those gross values. So now since we're looking up, it's still in a column, but we cannot use VLOOKUP here. If you think for a second about why that is, remember that VLOOKUP only works when your lookup values are in a column like IMBD code, but then the thing you want to return is to the right of that lookup value column. Well, in this case, our lookup values are in a column, but what we want to return is to the left. So we cannot use VLOOKUP. We can, however, use XLOOKUP. So that's what we're going to do now, is do these same lookup functions, but using XLOOKUP instead of V. So for XLOOKUP, similarly to VLOOKUP, you first specify your lookup value, and then the lookup array. Now this is just going to be the column that contains the lookup value. So our lookup array is simply this international gross column. So I'll click that first cell and then do Control Shift and down arrow to select the whole thing. All right, there's my lookup array. The return array is going to be the title column, which is B. So I'll click that first cell, Control Shift and down. There's my return array. And now I'm going to find this value in there, so I don't need to specify the if not found. So instead of typing something for this next argument, I'm just going to do the next comma. So if I don't put anything between these two commas, that indicates just skipping that argument and taking the default. And now I can specify the match mode. I'm going to do an exact match, so I'll put a 0 there for exact match. And I don't need to specify search mode since I'm doing exact match. All right, so I can just delete that last comma. I don't actually need it since I'm not going to specify any other argument. So if you just don't specify those arguments, Excel will do whatever the default behavior is. All right, and we get the skeleton key. So the next thing to do will be to look at this formula and think about what kind of changes you need to make. So if you've got your dollar signs to prevent the formula from this dollar sign, remember, makes this a mixed reference so that as you copy the formula over to the right, the column will not change that's referring to I-24. that value. The dollar signs on the cell range here, this data range, column F, makes sure that our lookup values are always coming from the same column, whether we copy this formula to the right or down. And then I also, in this column, am looking up the title. As I copy over to year and IMBD code, I will need to make some changes to this formula because I'll be looking up different things. So I'm going to let you make those changes on your own now. You need to be able to copy this formula across and down to fill in all of these cells with the formula appropriately. And you should be equipped now to make the changes that are needed to fill in the rest of those cells. Now we can move on to the next activity. Now we'll move on to activity 2. In this one, we have a horizontal arrangement of our lookup values. So now our lookup values in this first table are Super Bowl numbers. So this is the game number. So if we look up above in row 1, we have the different Super Bowl numbers. And then the rows below that have these other things like who won the Super Bowl, who the MVP was, and what stadium it was played in. So given a Super Bowl number, we want to return these other facts about that Super Bowl. Since the Super Bowl numbers are organized in a horizontal row, we need to use an HLOOKUP function. So I'm going to use HLOOKUP. The first thing to specify is my lookup value. So the value I want to look up for this first one is here in B20, so I'll select that. The table array, now I need to go up here and select the cells that contain the data that I want to look up from and return from. So I'm going to click here in B1, that's the first value, and I'll do Control Shift and down, and then Control Shift and right to select all of the data. So that's where I'm going to look up from. And then I need to say which row of that data range has the thing I want to return. Well, in this column, I'm wanting to return the winner. So the row that has the winner in it is row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I want to return something from row 6. And then I can need to say whether or not it's an exact match, and it is. I want to exactly match that Super Bowl number, and I hit enter. All right, so the San Francisco 49ers were the winner. And I can check that out by finding this Super Bowl number and looking it up, just like I did previously. All right, so now we want to see if we can copy and paste this across. All right, that's not working, so let's figure out why. What did we need to fix? All right, so as we look up winners from Super Bowls, as we copy this across, we want to keep looking at B20. All right, so as I copy this across, this goes to C20. Well, I didn't want to change to C. I wanted to keep it at B. All right, so that's the first thing I need to fix. All right, but now it's still not quite right. Now I need to say, out of that lookup table array, which row should I look up? So for my winner, I looked at row 6. For the MVP, I need to look at row 12. That's row 12. So for the MVP, I'm going to change this one to click on that MVP formula and change your return row to 12. All right, the MVP was Joe Montana. And then stadium is in row 13. So I'll change that third argument to a 13 for that last one. So 49ers, Joe Montana, and Silverdome. So now that we've filled in that first row, I'm going to let you work on your own to think about how you might need to edit that formula, or if at all, to be able to appropriately fill in the rest of the cells in that table. So take a moment to complete that, and then we'll move on to the second table. The next thing we're going to do is use the attendance number and return winner, QB winner, and QB loser. So the attendance is right here in the third row, and given that, I want to look up the winner and the QB winner and QB loser. All right, so that's the QB, quarterback of the winning team and quarterback of the losing team. Okay, so this time I'm just using a different value to look up, but our instructions say complete this second table using XLOOKUP. So I'll use XLOOKUP. I need to say what my lookup value is. Then I say what my lookup array is. Well, my lookup array, I'm going to find, that's attendance. So where am I going to find attendance? In row 3. So I'm going to start in B3 and use Control-Shift and my right arrow to select those values. So there's my lookup row. And now I need to specify my return row. That's where the winners are because I'm looking up winners in this column. So my winners are here. So I'll click the first one and then Control-Shift-Right to select the rest of that row. Then I don't need to specify if not found because I'm going to find it. I'll say exact match. And I can skip that last argument as well. Okay, Kansas City Chiefs. So at this point, you've seen a lot of examples of how to use lookup functions, and you have some good practice with that. So the rest of this table will be filled in by simply looking at the arguments that you put here and deciding where do you need dollar signs so that when you copy and paste, and what other changes do you need to make so that you are looking up and returning the right things to fill in the rest of that table. And that's it for that assignment. If you have any further questions, be sure to reach out to your instructor.